Alright, so this is my presentation on Gabriel Mouton, the founding father of the metric system. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. He was a French abbot, scientist, and he had a doctorate in theology, so he's also a doctor of theology. He had lots of interest in mathematics, which is why he ended up coming up with the base information that led to the metric system, which he proposed in a book that he wrote. Here's the title of his book. Not quite sure how to pronounce this either. The 4 years of French I took 10 years ago really aren't helping out right now. So in his book that he wrote in, or was published in 1670, he proposed the idea of what came to be the metric system. The book had information that he had come up with a standard natural length of measurement based on the circumference of the earth, and then he divided that decimally. His suggestion was a unit, the milliare, which would later become like a meter. That would be meter in French, I believe. The units would be in measurements of 10, just like the metric system is known for today. It was not until about 100 years later that his work would be taken by the French Academy of Science, Weights and Measures Committee, and they suggested the decimal metric system. It was officially adopted in 1791 in France, and that was over 100 years after Gabriel had passed. So he never got to see that come to fruition. He was born in 1618 in France, Lyon, France, and he died September 28th. That would make him 76 when he died. When he was 4 years of age, he was an altar boy at St. Paul's Church, in Lyon. This is where he took his holy orders, which was uh, fairly soon in his youth. He would live there all his life, and he's actually buried at a chapel there. Um, from what I could find, sometime before 1646, he received his doctorate in theology. In all his free time, he studied mathematics and other areas of his interest, and he had gathered a bit of recognition in France. Like there was a couple names that had supported him and recognized his accomplishments. And then he had his book published in 1670, and he spent pretty much most of his life just fulfilling his clerical duties with the church. Like the church was pretty much most of his life. So he lived during the 17th century, and from what I could find, it said that most of France at that time was just a farming country. Most people who lived in France there around that time lived and died in the same town as they were born. They didn't really move around a lot. It wasn't like a really big thing for them to do. They just lived and died where they were born. So that would be from 1601 to the year 1700. And then as far as fashion, that would be around 1650. That's when the Baroque era was. So the fashion would have been over the top. Before that, it would have been more like simple, like peasant fashion. And honestly, considering he's from more of like a low-key area in France, and that would be mostly a farming country, I'm almost certain that most of what he was seeing wearing was the simple peasant fashion. But what was popular around the time was these types of outfits. But if, most of the area he was from would have been poor, then he probably wouldn't have been wearing these, especially since he was working with the church. But I could not find any photos of what um, men in his position would have worn. I assume it's much like the photo of him that I posted at the beginning of this. So the metric system, that's just a system of measurement, and it's used in different areas of mass. So anytime we have to look at measurements like the meter, liter, gram, any units of length, distance, volume, mass, we're using the metric system. So I know that we always have to use that in most areas of math. Um, and yeah, that is the end of my presentation.